Hey everybody, my name is Jennifer Fugo, and I'm so excited to be able to share this information with you. Like, really, really excited. So, let's dive into this. You can obviously, I'm all over social media, so please come and follow me, G Free School on Twitter, Pinterest, Instagram. That's the general handle, and then Gluten Free School. No hyphens in between gluten and free. And let's get started. So, today we're going to talk about the 4 ways to save big on a healthy gluten free diet. Now, I think this is an incredibly important topic because so many people want to eat healthier. You obviously need to eat gluten free, and that's incredibly important for all of us who are in this community. But we don't want to be paying, out the nose for incredibly sometimes subpar products, I'll be honest. Some are great, some are not, and it oftentimes feels like we're spending a heck of a lot of money on food that doesn't really make sense why it's so expensive. So my name is Jennifer Fugo. If you're not familiar with me, thank you so much for being here and for checking out this presentation. I'm the founder of Gluten Free School. I'm a gluten-free advocate, expert. I also have a podcast. It's called the Gluten Free School Podcast. You can check it out it is hosted on every single podcasting platform, especially iTunes. I have traveled around the country. I give lectures and talks on how to live gluten-free, and I'm also a best-selling author of the 2014 release, The Savvy Gluten-Free Shopper. Now, I want you to think in your mind about this question. Do you feel that eating gluten-free is more expensive? Think about it. What is the answer that comes up? Is it a resounding yes? Because when I'm sitting with a group of gluten-free folks and I ask that question, everybody's hand goes up. Every single one. There's always that occasional, maybe 1 or 2 people. It really depends on where I'm talking and what their priorities are. But there are always a couple people who don't necessarily think it's more expensive because they simply just switched and they have the means to do so, and the price tag doesn't really matter to them. But for the majority of us, the price does matter. And it feels so painful to have to go through the process of, oh my gosh, spending so much money on this food for our health. So I want to start us off with a story just to underline how real this is. So I went to a party for my best friend. It was a baby shower for her, and her sister decided to host a tea party in New York City at a very fancy tea house. I'd never been to tea. I'm not a super fancy dressed up type of person, but look, it's her party. That's where you go. And so as a good gluten-free girl, I went and looked up the menu and saw that, oh wow, it's not just a cup of tea that we're getting. There's actually more things involved, like those little sandwiches and scones and all sorts of stuff. And my inclination was, well, do they have a gluten-free option? And so upon scrolling down after I saw the little asterisk, I did see that a gluten-free menu was available. Except that it was an additional $16 on top of the $60 that they were already asking you to pay for a quote-unquote regular sitting or place seating. And I was like, $76? Like, what the heck am I getting for $76? And I felt bad that, my best friend's sister was going to have to cover this expense. I even offered to pay for it, which they declined. They appreciated the offer, but they declined. And it turns out that $76 got me 1 slice of gluten-free bread with the innards of the sandwich on the plate. It got me a tiny fruit salad, a little tiny side salad, and 2 gluten-free scones on top of 1 cup of, I think it was some sort of lavender tea. That's it. That's all I got, $76. Now, granted, we could say, well, maybe it was because we had a party and, they charge more a lot of times for parties. That was actually the regular price. If I went there any day of the week, it would still be $76. And to me, that is just ridiculous. But it typifies what many of us feel is that we go expecting one thing, and the reaction of gluten free has turned out to be sort of ridiculous and almost comically ridiculous, to be honest. Like $16 for that, an additional $16, $76 was the cost of that meal. And it was tiny, and I was still hungry when we left. So, this is the thing. I feel like there is so much frustration, and I hear that in people's voices and in their emails, and it doesn't have to be that way. But I want you to know that this experience that I've just shared is, this is pretty common. When you walk into the grocery store and you go to the gluten-free aisle, you know that a 12-ounce box of pasta, because you never see 16 ounces at all. At 12 ounces of pasta is probably going to run you somewhere between $2.50 and $4, as opposed to when you used to probably buy the store brand on sale of wheat or whole wheat pasta for 99 cents. So we know right off the bat that things are going to be more expensive. But we really need to know if this is true, and I want to share that with you now. So let's do a reality check. Do you think that gluten-free is more expensive? You've seen the price tags, and I'm going to tell you that yes, it is. A study was done on 50 some odd products, normal, typical food products, and they found that the gluten-free versions were 242% on average more expensive. So the fact that gluten-free is expensive is not just some idea in your mind. It's actually real. And, there's a lot of things that go along with this, and we can talk for a moment after we kind of get through this section about why that is. But, this is something we can't quite control. We can't control how much a company is going to charge for a product. And obviously they are charging a lot more. But what we can control is waste. And this was one thing that I found to be very significant. And hear me out on this. So the average family in the U.S. is wasting about 25% of all the food and beverages that come into their home. 25%. And when you think about that, 25%, that food, that drink, that beverage, that whatever it is that's being wasted, that is money in essence. It's just transformed money because you bought something, but it's still dollars. You are throwing that in the trash. And that is something that I think we can control. In fact, I know we can control it. And I want to run some numbers by you real quick so that you understand where exactly you fall into this and how significant this is for your budget, especially if you're trying to stay on a budget. So a gluten-filled diet on average costs folks around $9,000 a year. All right, so that's for a family of probably about 4 people, and that sounds like a lot of money, $9,000, but that's not an extravagant, organic, non-GMO meal. This is just normal foods that you would go to the grocery store and buy without probably much in the way of being considerate of those additional extras that many people are looking for. And so the average waste that they're looking at is $2,200, almost $2,300, right? $2,300 you threw out. Oops. Like, would you write a check for $2,300 and then throw it in the trash? That's literally what is happening. But here, the problem is that when we do the math for the gluten-free diet, because it's more expensive, I know the numbers are like wild. I don't know about you, but I don't want to be throwing almost $6,000 out. That's ridiculous. That is crazy. And so this is what we have to think about, is how much we are wasting. I can't necessarily control how much you bring into your house and how much you spend on food. It's my hope that when I'm done this talk, you're going to have a better idea of what to buy and what will really help to rein in the expense of eating this diet. But what we can all control is what ends up in the trash, because otherwise, literally, this is how throwing food away should look to you. It should look like throwing dollar bills in the garbage, because that's ultimately what's happening. And I'm not trying to be dramatic, but that's the honest to God truth. And seriously, when you think about it, what is that $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 costing you? Have you thought of that? I mean, what would you do with that kind of money? I mean, I know for sure there's plenty of things that I would do with that kind of money if I had it. And it does matter. Don't blow it off, because in this day and age, all of us want to be more cost conscious, but we actually didn't even realize that the food we're throwing away is part of that. It's wasteful. Because if you didn't have to make, say, that additional $5,000 a year, maybe you could work less. You wouldn't need that second part-time job. You could take an extra vacation. You could dine out and be social. You know, how great would it be to take your friends and family out for a dinner, and it's totally on you? Or you're getting better quality food. Maybe now you can afford organic meats, organic dairy, organic whatever it is that you'd like to buy, right? Better quality food and eating at better quality restaurants. You could also save. It's really important to have savings, and obviously we want to save for our kids, we want to save for college. That's all possible. Maybe get a new car, pay down debt, afford better health insurance. That would be great, especially if you've got a lot of doctor's appointments. Those co-pays and co-insurances, they add up very quickly. So the reason that I know all this is because I lived it. This is a picture of my husband and I on our honeymoon, and you know, he's been so supportive of me, of my dietary change. He is my number one advocate, always in my corner. And unfortunately, we went through about a 4-year period where my husband was incredibly unemployed. He had work here and there, but generally he was unemployed. He had been laid off from his company suddenly. We did not see it coming, and we instantly lost 2/3 of our income. And it was such a significant amount that, you know, for us, it was a big change. I mean, we never had to worry about buying things, and not that we were living some lavish, extravagant life. That's certainly not us, but we could go out to dinner whenever we wanted. I could buy all organic food. I could spend money, you know, on things that I saw fit, but all of a sudden, that had to change. Simultaneously, I was diagnosed with adrenal fatigue and candida, so I had to go through this regimen of supplements, seeing functional medicine doctors, getting testing done, and I actually had to buy organic and more expensive food. Now, I had to do what I had to do. As many of you know, especially if you've seen functional medicine practitioners, it's typically out of pocket. You're not even getting co-pays at that point. You're paying in full for the bill. The same goes with the testing and the supplements and the better quality food. So I had to make a decision. I had 1/3 the amount of money to deal with, and I had to figure out how to cover our normal bills, not go into debt, because we didn't end up pulling any money out of our savings in this process, and you know, eating better, eating in a way that would help heal my body, because I'd been gluten free already for a year now, and I had gotten better, but I got sick again. And part of it was because of the type of gluten-free food and diet that I had chosen to eat, which unfortunately was very carb and sugar heavy. You know, I thought that, you know, it was great to have all these treats and stuff, and they do serve a purpose, and it's nice to have gluten-free cake for your birthday or for a holiday, but it's not something that we should be eating all the time. And I paid the price at the ripe old age of 29, having some serious health complications as a result. So, you know, I really figured this out, and I was able to master it in such a way that it didn't take up my entire day to do all this stuff. They were just little tips and tricks and shortcuts to being able to save money in different places that allowed me to buy better quality food and take care of my health. And so I had so many friends and clients that would get these little tips off me, and then eventually said, you know, hey, can you condense this all down into one single format? That way it'll be easier for me to, you know, work on and implement these into my life. And that was where this presentation and the Savvy Gluten Free Shopper book came about. So we have very limited time. I don't want to take up your entire day, and I know that you're really looking forward to getting this information, but again, please go follow me on Twitter, and you're more than welcome to share any of this. If you've got anything going on, I would really appreciate if you would put it aside and focus on the topics we're going to talk about. So I want to help you discover the keys to saving money as well as your health. I'm going to show you how to become savvy and what exactly that means. And I also want to share with you the 4 big strategies that I've used to reduce cooking, increase nutrient density, and to have more time. And last but not least, I'll also share with you the steps to take all of this information further. So to show you that this does really work, here's a quote from my client, Joan. She had used my tips and tricks during a very expensive month. It was December and around the Christmas holiday and such. And she found after tracking the before and after that literally everything that she learned from me saved her half on her credit card bill. That's huge. That is a huge amount of money, and I was really pleased to see that it helped her that much. Plus, it also gave her the sense of more control in her kitchen and the quality of food that came out of it. It gave her a better ability to manage her time and expenses, and ultimately that really helped her reduce stress and feel better. So, these tips do work, and I'm looking forward to sharing them with you. But first, I have to tell you what exactly it means to become savvy, because I think that this is a word that we like to use a lot, but we don't exactly know what it means. And in essence, savvy means smart, sharp, astute, resourceful, and to really have the know-how to get things done. Now, you might not realize that there is a sense of like trying to just figure things out. And I will tell you the reason ultimately that I came up with all of this was because I didn't want to just throw the towel in. I wanted to make sure that I figured this all out, that there was an answer and that I just hadn't found it yet. And that's how I approach everything. That is what I learned from this tough period in time. Not just all this stuff about saving money, but really any problem can be resolved when you think about it in terms of there is a solution. I just haven't found it yet, and I have to keep looking for it. And eventually, you will find one. And that's really what being savvy is about. It's about saying, okay, I know that cost is an issue for me. I want to eat well. I'm going to figure this out. And that's exactly the approach that we want to take with this information, right? Because we want to know where to spend more money on and where to cut costs, right? Because I don't want this to be about living on a shoestring or about cheap. That is a foolish way to go about eating. The whole like gluten-free on a shoestring thing, you're looking at price tags and price tags only. Yeah, well, price tags are great, but they don't take into account nutrient density. And what I mean by nutrient density is the amount and quality of nutrients that are in a particular food or food product. If you are eating food products that say cost $1 but are devoid of actual nutrients, you're never going to feel full, you're going to overeat calories, and you're going to eat a lot of additives and all these gross food ingredients that aren't real food, that are not going to help your health. So nutrient density is looking for really good quality food for a good price. Ultimately, that's what it comes down to. So let's talk about this. Let's dive into the 4 ways to save big on a healthy gluten-free diet. But one real quick thing I want to just clarify quickly for everybody, I think it is important, is just to know that gluten-free products, they are more expensive. They are in general. But I want to take a moment to caution you that we should not necessarily direct our anger toward food companies and saying that they're trying to rip us off, because that's not quite the case. There are more expenses involved in producing gluten-free food because we're requiring them to get their products certified, which costs money. We're asking them to produce their food on lines that aren't, cross-contaminated with wheat because, they're not running wheat-based products down that line. We're asking them to change their packaging, to do all sorts of things to accommodate us, and that the food the share of the food market that the gluten-free space or niche holds is very small. It's still a niche market in comparison to the grand big picture of how much the food industry makes from food products in general. So it's not necessarily that companies are trying to take advantage of us. It's more that there's more expenses involved that allow for fewer coupons, fewer discounts. And so that's why nutrient density here is really key, because we can find ways to eat really well without necessarily relying so heavily on gluten-free products. And then that way, if you want to splurge on something, go ahead, and you don't mind that so much. But if your entire grocery cart is loaded with gluten-free products, yeah, you're going to have a ginormous bill. And I've been there, I've done that. And, again, that's partially why I've found that these are great. This is a great way to save money. So let's talk about, first and foremost, the most non-sexy part of this entire talk. It's called meal planning. I know that most people don't want to do meal planning. We want to just walk to the refrigerator and find something magically cooked there already for us, but that's not going to happen. And a lot of times too, if you're really tired and you work a lot and you've got so much going on in your life, the idea of cooking seems like one more thing to do. But I'm going to be honest with you, a lot of times people are spending way too much money and time in the kitchen that's unnecessary, and then that food goes in the trash can because we don't plan for it. We either cook too much or we buy food that doesn't end up getting cooked, gets slimy, moldy, gross, and we throw it in the trash. Well, what I did to alleviate this is I spend Saturday, because I have Saturday and Sunday quote unquote off, and maybe your work week looks a little different, so whatever your weekend is, figure that out. And that Saturday I'll create a list of meals that I want to make for that week. I plot them out. And just really simple. You can use a blank sheet of paper. There's nothing fancy here about this. And I make sure that I, more or less have enough for, my husband and myself. And obviously if you have kids, you're going to do the same thing with them. And then I'll go to the grocery store that day after creating a shopping list based off of those recipes. Or at least if it's something in my mind I'm going to create, I know more or less how much I'm going to need. And I write that down. And I do stick to that list. Buying additional extras and going, let me try this, let me try that, that can really jack the price of your bill up. And then Sunday is what I like to call my big cooking day. This is the day where I will have everything going. My oven, my stovetop, my convection oven, which is like a dual toaster oven thing. I'll have the crock pot going, maybe the rice cooker, and I will cook a lot. And the meals that I cook are able to last in the fridge for at least 3 to 4 days. I do not cook anything with fish on my big cooking day. The reason is that I want the food to last for those 3 to 4 days. It gives me leeway to not have to cook again until later in the week. If you cook fish, you've got to eat it by the next day. So it's not going to be able to stay and last you through the week. So I always leave fish until later in the week, maybe Thursday, maybe Friday, to make some sort of fish or seafood. But big cooking day, think how many things could I get accomplished in the shortest amount of time using whatever I have at my disposal to make it happen. And then you're just going to focus on cooking 2 or 3 times that week. That's it. You don't need to cook every day. Now, I will specify this. If you don't like leftovers, then this system won't work for you. Being entirely honest about that. But if you don't mind leftovers, and I personally don't, I would prefer not to have to cook every day, so I eat leftovers. If that's not a thing for you, then this is going to be a bit of a challenge and you will have to cook every day. But for those of us that don't, 2 to 3 times a week. That's it. Again, big cooking day for me is Sunday. I'll cook again maybe Wednesday night, and then probably Friday. That's it. I allow for 1 or 2 evenings to go out to eat, and it doesn't have to be any place fancy. And sometimes I'll even go to places where I know that the meal will be big enough where I'll be able to take home basically a second meal from leftovers. But, 2 to 3 times a week, that's it. That's all you have to do. The key is you have to plot it all out. What recipes are you going to make when? Know that. And then on top of it, you want to make note of what you'll need to do later in the week. That way, you can go on autopilot. So say, for example, you know that Thursday morning you need to pull the chicken out of the freezer to let it defrost in the refrigerator all day. So when you get home, you can throw it into the oven. Well, if you forget and your week has been rough, you wake up Thursday morning and then walk like a zombie out the door to your car to go to work, by the time you get home, you don't have any defrosted chicken. It presents a problem. So the idea is that if you paste up a note, or you have some sort of pad you can write on that's on your refrigerator, and you get used to going on autopilot, you could go, okay, Thursday morning, you just look at it, you go, okay, take chicken out of freezer and put it into the refrigerator. It's already done for you. So when your brain isn't operating optimally, you can just follow the directions that you created when you were, at the highest point of brain power in the week. So going on autopilot is a really big deal. And then also too, having that idea of, prepping whatever you can in advance, obviously, to help things move along. So the second step is working the grocery store, because frankly, the grocery store works us. If you think that the grocery store isn't trying to make money off you and they're doing us favors, they're not. Even all those sales and discounts and end cap deals and stuff, those are not helping us. It might appear to be that's the case, but it's really not. Grocery stores work us. So we need to figure out how to work the grocery store in our favor. So first of all, I want you to focus on foods that happen to be gluten-free, and there are so many foods in the grocery store that fit this. So most of the foods in the produce aisle, fruits, vegetables, most nuts and seeds are gluten-free natural. Everything is gluten-free naturally, but you just have to be careful of cross-contamination and how things were processed and packaged. And obviously, if things like nuts and seeds are in a package, you want to look for that label or call the company and just inquire. But you've got seafood, meat, dairy products. You've got a lot of different things, oils, vinegars, all sorts of stuff that naturally happen to be gluten-free. Those are the foods you want to focus your meals around, and obviously there are gluten-free grains as well. And legumes. You want to focus your diet around those foods. And truthfully, we don't want to focus on recipes that are going to cost you a ton of time in the kitchen. Simplicity. Few ingredients, maybe 5, 6, maybe 7 at most, and maybe 3 or 4 of those are spices. How great would that be? So simple stuff, food that happens to be gluten-free, rather than looking for that gluten-free label of something that is trying to be a memory, like a pot pie or something like that, some processed food product of the past that there is now recreated gluten-free. That's what's going to cost you more money. The next thing is to prioritize your food choices. What I mean by this is, for example, if you know that you want to buy berries, right, and you're concerned about pesticides, what I would suggest is, and what I do is buying, if you can, organic berries. And the reason is that berries and peaches and bell peppers and certain other fruit and vegetables are very high in pesticides. That's if you care, if that's a priority for you. If it's not, then buying conventional. There are reasons why not to buy conventional, but I want to focus your energy and attention on buying real food first. Then, if you can, start buying better quality products. So buying according to the Dirty Dozen list is a really great thing to do. Dirty Dozen list is something you can look up on the internet, and it tells you what are the cleanest foods that naturally occur, as well as the dirtiest foods as far as a pesticide standpoint are concerned. The next thing would be to think about, okay, well, what about my meat or my fish? Could I buy wild-caught fish or wild-caught seafood? that's a better choice than the conventional farm raised. However, that might not be in your price point. The same goes with meat. Looking for organic, grass-fed, pasture-raised meats. Same thing. Can you afford it? Because it's usually twice the price. But there are ways around some of these issues, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But obviously, you've got to prioritize what's most important to you. So, for example, if you really want to buy grass-fed beef and you know that, oh my gosh, a pound of grass-fed beef is going to run me $10 as opposed to $5 or $4 or $3 or however much it costs where you live, then you've got to think about where that money is going to come out of the budget in general. So, you might not spend money on produce that's organic. That might be the compromise, in order to make it work. We've got to find a balance between everything in order to make our budgets work. Now, one great thing that I will suggest are grocery shopping guides. There's one from Cecilia's Marketplace. There's another from Triumph Dining. Both are great. I have a preference for Cecilia's Marketplace. I'm not paid by either company to talk about them. I have both. I really like both. I just happen to like the way that Cecilia's Marketplace is laid out. So those are two great guides you can get on the internet, and they tell you what products in the grocery store are gluten-free. They've actually done the homework for you. So by reading up on some of the stuff that you typically like to buy, you can even find some of the store brand products are gluten-free. So it saves a lot of time and means that your trip to the grocery store is larger than just that gluten-free aisle. So it's just they're really great resources, and I can't recommend them any more highly. They're great to have. And then, like I said, this is the idea of being efficient with your shopping list. And so I like to separate things by the stores that I'll go to. I do shop at produce stores. I think that produce stores can be a great spot to get produce at a much lower cost. So if I know that on Tuesday I'm going to be driving past the produce store, I'll make my list so that everything that I need to get at the one grocery store is on this list, and everything that I need to grab at this grocery store or this produce store is on another list. Just again, makes it easier. And when you shop like this, when you focus your diet around foods that happen to be gluten-free, then you can look at the sales and the circulars. That makes life so much easier, because usually the first page and a half of any grocery store, they focus around produce and real food. That way, again, you can save some money. And I want to talk about bulk buying for a moment. When I say bulk buying, I do not mean bulk bins at a grocery store. Unless you are walking into a gluten-free, a certified 100% gluten-free grocery store, and not many exist, my friends, then it's okay to buy out of those bins. But if you are not going to one of those 100% gluten-free grocery stores, you cannot go into the bulk bin aisle and pull out your quinoa or your rice or your nuts or your dried fruit. Those are not safe. You cannot buy in bulk in that way at a grocery store, because those bins are contaminated. There is a really high risk of cross-contamination. However, you can buy in bulk on the internet. There are companies that sell bulk nuts, bulk grains, bulk beans, or maybe you buy, a whole case of things and you get a much discounted price as a result. And I want to say this about beans and grains, because I do think this is important. If you buy them bagged, which you always should, you want to make sure that they have been tested for gluten. There is a very high incidence of grains that are naturally gluten-free being contaminated with gluten. So just because you pick up that bag of rice that's the store brand, it doesn't mean that it hasn't been contaminated with gluten. So it is important that those products bear a gluten-free label, or that you call the company and double check what they are. Now, we want to stop throwing money away. I stressed this so great. Remember that little graphic with the trash can and the money, and the woman just like throwing her money in the trash like it was garbage. We want to stop that process. Now, I recognize that some of you may say, well, it's difficult cooking for one. I get so bored. What am I to do? It's just too much food. cooking for 1 or 2 is really easy because you're always going to have leftovers for the most part. So if you focus around cooking food that can be saved or frozen, for example, you have to cook less. That's one of the greatest things. If, say, you cook a dish like a crock pot dish that's going to have 6 servings in it, and you know that you're probably only going to eat 3 or 4 that week, put those extra servings into individual serving sized or portioned out Tupperware containers, glass containers, the freezer bags, whatever it may be that's safe to go into the freezer, and save it. That way the following week or a month down the road when you don't have time to cook, or if there's an emergency and say a family member is in the hospital, you don't have time, well, you just pull things out. So it is not difficult to cook for 1. That is like the biggest excuse that I hear people make, and that's just an excuse. It means you don't know what to do with the rest of the food, and we need to stop thinking from that perspective that it's so hard. It's not hard. It's very simple, and we want to start making use of the food that we have and saving it. So extra portions are golden. We want to consider that to be the gold standard. If you know that a recipe isn't going to have many extra portions, cook more. Like maybe make 1.5 times the normal amount so that you have extra portions. Pretend that there's an imaginary extra 2 people in your family that you're cooking for. Whatever it may be, do that. And then before people sit down to eat at dinner, if you know that there should be extra portions, put them aside before you serve the meal. Especially when we do like a dining experience buffet style where we put all of the food on the table in front of us, people are a lot more likely to overeat and eat more portions than they normally need. So there's nothing wrong with putting things away and making sure that your family, number 1, isn't overeating, but that you're also not losing those extra portions that you've cooked. And remember, with fruit and veggies, a lot of them you can do things with. They don't need to be thrown away. I want to start with vegetables. So for example, like avocados, if you cut open an avocado, you don't need any fancy gizmos to keep the other side fresh. Just keep the pit in the other half. I like to eat avocados. I cut them open, you cut them lengthwise, down the longer, usually you try to cut them lengthwise through the longer side, and if you eat 1/2, you keep the pit in the other side, and that will keep the flesh from going bad as quickly. So you'll still have 2 or 3 days before that other part of the avocado will usually go bad. And so that's one way to save. Like, you don't necessarily need to use an avocado all in one sitting, so just don't take the pit out. That's the key. With onions, for example, onions do go bad. They don't sit forever. What I'll do is I'll dice up all my onions in one sitting because I cry when I cut onions, and I put them into freezer bags and I save them. They freeze very well. They can be frozen for up to a month or so, and I'll add them. You don't even have to defrost them. You can add them right into like some hot oil to saute vegetables or start a pasta sauce or whatever it is that you're doing. If you're making a crock pot dish, just dump them in. You don't need to defrost these onions. I mean, you're never going to eat anything that's frozen as like a raw part of a raw salad. That's the only one little caveat thing here that you will never do. But it cuts down on prep time, and it means that those onions aren't going to go bad. They're in the freezer. I do the same thing with celery. With celery, I'll take off all the stalks. I'll rinse everything off. I will use from the inside out of the celery stalk. So if I'm making, say, tuna fish and I want to add some celery, I'll chop up the leaves and the inner, more like baby stalks and use them more immediately. And then the outer stalks, I'll rinse them and then chop them up, and I'll save them in freezer bags, and they can last just fine for 2 to 3 weeks in the freezer. Again, I use them for soups and stews, sautés, that kind of stuff, because I hate coming back home to cook something. I open up my crisper drawer and my celery is like disgusting and slimy and it falls over and it's gross. So you can't get it back. Like, you just wasted that $3. It's gone down the tubes. So I found that was a really easy thing to do. The next thing that I also do is I do not buy chopped, pre-washed salad. Those are some of the biggest wastes of money. Unless you're having a dinner party and you're trying to cut down on, food prep, the easiest thing to do is to buy lettuce and other greens that are already still attached, to the root base. Cut them all up, rinse them off in a salad spinner, spin them. So if you don't have a salad spinner, get a salad spinner. It's amazing. It'll help get the additional water off of them, and then place them into a large Ziploc bag, press out most of the air, and then zip the zipper all the way across. That will stay in your fridge, say of like romaine lettuce. It could stay in your fridge up to 9 to 10 days, just fine. You will not find a bag of pre-washed lettuce that will stay that long. You're lucky if you get 2 to 3 days out of it. So that's a really easy way to get around that and save money there. I would recommend that there are other vegetables as well that can last longer in the refrigerator. Lemons, limes, those are some fruits, for example, but also too, like carrots. Carrots are a great staple to have on hand. And the other thing too is I definitely want to encourage you to, if you're not home a lot and you don't do a whole lot of cooking, frozen vegetables are awesome. There's nothing wrong with them. They are picked at the height of their freshness, and then they are flash frozen. So they are an excellent resource to get. I would highly recommend getting them. With fruit, for example, one thing you can do with fruit is to freeze like berries or peaches. You can even freeze pears. You have to cut them up, obviously, and you can freeze them if they're a very liquidy fruit that has a lot of juice. A lot of times what I'll do is I'll get a baking sheet, put some wax paper down, cut everything up, lay it out in one flat layer, and then freeze it first, then put them into freezer bags. But you can use the fruit for smoothies, for baking, for any number of things, and that way it doesn't go bad. You can actually even freeze watermelon, believe it or not. I'll chunk it up and put it into a baggie, and then I use it in the summertime in smoothies. It's amazing. So there's no reason why you should really be throwing almost anything away. Obviously salad greens you're not going to be able to freeze, but even like lemon slices, you can freeze lemon slices. There's a lot of things that we can do that we're not actually checking out and that are really important. Now, next are grains and beans. I don't know if you know this, but you can actually freeze them. They last for a good month or so in the freezer. Cooked, of course. So I'll cook up grains, a big pot of grains, like rice for my husband. I will freeze more than half of it. That way, when I don't have time to cook rice, I can pull it out and it defrosts very quickly. The same goes with beans. I put them into single serving containers when I cook a whole bag of beans. A whole bag of beans, by the way, is a lot more inexpensive than buying a can. You can usually get a bag of beans for around $1.25. That might cost you, because some of the organic cans of beans are up on around $2 or more. So what you're getting in a whole bag of beans is a ton more. If you have a pressure cooker, you could cook beans in 15 minutes, but it's just a lot easier to cook your own beans, have them simmer on the stovetop on Sunday, and then freeze them. You'll be good to go for probably almost the month, depending on how much you make. So both can be frozen. Even quinoa as well. Now, herbs are another thing. I hate throwing away herbs. I almost cringe at buying the fresh herbs because they go bad so quickly, and then you just have to toss them. So one way I found around that is if I do have to buy fresh herbs, I'll mince them up and then put them into freezer, the little ice cube trays, and then fill the top. You have to press the minced up herbs like, say, basil, oregano, thyme, rosemary, that kind of stuff. You can dry some of them. Some are better dry or okay dried, some are not. Parsley is another one, but you can press them down into the little molds and then fill it either with water or with some sort of oil like olive oil, and then just freeze them. When they're frozen, pop them out and put them into a freezer bag, and then use them, you just toss them in at the end of a meal cooking, and it'll just melt right in, and you've got these great quote-unquote fresh herbs you added to your dish. The same goes for coconut milk. If you ever buy cans of coconut milk, it can't last long outside of once the can is open. So you can just shake it up, whatever's left, or blend or stir it up to make sure it's incorporated. Pour it into the little freezer trays, get your ice cubes, then once they're frozen, pop them out and keep them in little freezer bags. That way you have single serving sizes. With sauces and You can do the same exact thing. Pesto you can freeze. To pasta sauce you can freeze. You could freeze it in little ice cubes if you want for single serving size, or you could easily just freeze it in a container or a baggie as well. Sometimes bags can be really great. If it's a liquidy material, make sure to get the double zipper. Lay them flat on a baking sheet in the freezer, so then you end up with this like file looking thing that actually has all the contents in it. It's super easy. Please don't also toss leftovers. There's no reason to do that. As long as it's something with all these ingredients in it, you can very easily freeze your meal. And if you're not sure, either look it up on the internet or give it a shot and see how it goes. Worst things in life have happened. I mean, that's the honest to God truth. Worst things in life have happened than screwing up something in the kitchen. We waste so much food already. If you're saving money and you do an experiment and see how it turns out and it doesn't turn out great, well, you know better for the next time. And the last thing is I want to share with you is to simplify your cooking. Get time-saving appliances, a rice cooker, 1 or 2 crock pots. They're amazing because you can cook while you're at work, while you're sleeping, and yes, they are safe to do that. You don't have to be worried. They're not going to start fires. As I had said, a pressure cooker. I actually got a convection toaster oven, which is amazing because it's like an additional oven. So all these little gadgets, an immersion blender, a really great high-powered blender, those are all great and they'll simplify your cooking. You also want to stock your pantry, herbs, spices, oils, vinegars, different sauces, and things that will help you actually cook. Making sure that you have the right staples all the time makes life a heck of a lot easier than having to buy tons of food every single week for every meal. Plus, in a pinch, then you could go into your pantry and go, okay, well, what do I have? What could I make with what I have? And throw something together. And then bulk cooking. So maybe, like I said, the big cooking day on Sunday would be your big day. But maybe you're also too going to double or triple a batch of pasta sauce or something else, some sort of stew. That way you have a lot and then you can freeze portions. And then I always say this, if you're going to do that and you're going to store a lot of things in your freezer, which I do, have a pad on the front of the freezer and mark down what you put in to the freezer and the date. And then maybe note down when it should be eaten by. The other thing that I will suggest is using masking tape to mark your containers and your baggies of what's in there, because it's very easy to forget what it is and how long it's been in the freezer. So those are 2 really important things. And then bulk prep is also incredibly important. Like I said, chopping up all the onions. I'll do all the garlic, for example. I'll chop up like 2 or 3 heads of garlic all at once. I'll put it into a glass jar, pour olive oil over top, sealing it in, and store it in the refrigerator. That'll last me maybe 3 weeks, maybe. I like a lot of garlic. If you don't, so you'd probably use less. But then I only have to cut it up that once. By eliminating me having to prep onions, to prep garlic, to prep all these other things, it means that I can just put things into the pan and start cooking. That is a lot of extra time, especially on a Wednesday or a Thursday where I am tired and I might not have a full hour to cook. I might only have 15 minutes. I've eliminated that additional time that it would take me to get there. So another couple favorite time and money saving tips. I'll freeze bananas, peel them, put them in freezer bags and freeze them. I store all of my nuts and seeds in the freezer. That's really important, the refrigerator or the freezer, so that they don't go rancid. They have to be raw nuts or seeds. Anything that's been roasted should be left outside of the freezer, but anything else should be saved inside. Another thing that I do, and I'll be honest with you, it's super easy, is I watch for sales. I honestly do. This is one of the biggest ways that I know we talked about this before, but I wanted to make sure that I told you this, is like, especially with meat products, a lot of times the meat market will mark things down right before they have to get rid of them. Like they'll basically end up throwing them into the trash, which doesn't actually happen. A lot of the guys in the meat department will take all this stuff home and throw it into a freezer and use it for later. So why don't you do that? I have bought grass-fed beef on sale for 50% off many times, and I buy it all. I'm probably the next customer's worst nightmare, because if there's 6 bags of grass-fed beef cubes, I'm buying every single one. And I put them into the freezer, and I will pull them out one every other week and make a stews or something else. I will use them. So again, on those weeks where I might not have time to go to the grocery store, I've got vegetables in the freezer, I've got meat in the freezer, I've got my grains in my pantry, I've got my spices and my herbs, and I've got other things that I can add to it. So I don't sometimes even need to go to the grocery store. Sure, it's great to have salads and stuff and all this, and all this fresh stuff, but there are some weeks where it's just busy and hectic, and I'm pulling stuff out of the freezer that I've already made, and I'm putting things together that are super simple. So there's no reason why we have to stress so hard about mealtime. The trick is, and the key is, preparation. Preparation is what wins the race. It's what wins the game. It ultimately will determine whether we win or succeed. Because if you're not prepared, there's not a good likelihood that you're going to come out on top. And so, if anything, I hope that what I can share with you is that this kind of information is incredibly valuable, not just for, someone who's living alone, but for families. By meal planning, by learning how to work the grocery store, by being more efficient in your kitchen, and being open to trying this way of doing things, not only will you find that you're cooking less, but you're actually going to save money. Believe it or not, it's the honest to God truth. And all of this stuff is really just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, I'm just sharing some of the things off the top of my head. These are the common things that I do every day. But there are so many other little tricks and tips and kitchen hacks and stuff that have made this process simple. And I'm not like spending 2 hours in the grocery store. I am just walking through. I am in and out of the grocery store as fast as possible. My life is about efficiency. I don't have a ton of time. And if you're a mother, you don't have a ton of time. So you want this process to be incredibly efficient and easy to use and do. Now, the reason is why you want to do this is because it gives you more control. Ultimately, that's what this is all about. Simplifying your cooking is not that hard. There's this misunderstanding in, at least I would say, American culture, that cooking is just too hard. It's not too hard. It takes a little bit of time and practice, but until you're willing to put in a little bit of time and practice, it is going to feel hard. It's hard to get started with anything in life. So just get started. If you need help with cooking, there's tons of online resources, and there's also local cooking classes in your area. I took cooking classes at one point, and it really helped me get more confident in the kitchen. You don't need to be Giada De Laurentiis or Emeril Lagasse. Like, those are professional chefs. That's not real life cooking. Just get cooking. That's all you have to do. It will make such a big difference, and it will give you back your time. Honest to God, these tips and tricks will help you get back lost time, because I don't have time to cook every day. But when I have time to spend with my family, when I have time to spend with friends and go to the gym and do all that stuff, that to me is incredibly worthwhile. I don't want you to turn into some DIY crazy person that has to and I'm not saying DIY people are crazy, but I know a lot of women that are trying to do everything, and that's what I mean in saying that. They're trying to do everything, and they've become a slave in their kitchen, and they hate it. I don't want that to happen to you. If you love being in the kitchen, great. But if you don't, you don't have to be. It doesn't have to be that way. And that way you'll get more enjoyment out of the food that you eat. You'll get to spend more time with your family and have the free time that you're looking for. And plus, last but not least, you are going to save money no matter what your budget is. Whether you are on food stamps and you're trying to make ends meet, or you've got unlimited funds and you just want to be more savvy and cost conscious about what you're buying and how much you're spending and eliminating waste, you will save money. So that's a really, really important thing. And I just want to to hammer this home with the idea that this does all add up. It all does matter. Look, we might say like, I'm only saving 50 cents or a dollar here and there. But to be honest with you, I sometimes go to the grocery store and I'm only spending $40 for that week for my husband and I. That's it. And I'm not buying cheap food. I'm buying good, nutrient dense quality food. But part of the reason is because I'm smart and savvy when I see deals and sales that I can take advantage of. I look for those 50% off stickers for the meat. You're not going to find that so much with fish. But other areas, like I look for that stuff. I look at the circulars. I really have found it's just having the awareness, having it in your mind of creating that pattern. And this does, I know I mentioned a moment ago, food stamps. This does actually work. I was able to put together a meal plan that not only fell beneath the financial threshold for someone who was on like a very low end plan of a food assistance program or food stamp plan in Pennsylvania state, but that I then had food left over for the next week, which meant that I could actually buy better quality or more food that I wasn't able to buy the week before. And my teacher, because I had to do this for a nutrition course, was so incredibly impressed. But I just used the principles that are in of what I've learned and that are in my book. That's all I did. And so last but not least, I just wanted to share with you that these tips really do help people. I had one client that went through a really rough time. Her mother was in the hospital for over a week. She was incredibly sick. And my client couldn't cook. She's celiac disease. She couldn't cook. She was at the hospital all the time. And by stocking her freezer with all the leftovers and the extras, she was able to eat that week and eat well. And she told me I was saved by my freezer. So these things really do help. So again, the idea is from leaving this talk, pick your big cooking day, learn to work the grocery store, make friends with your freezer, and learn to love it. Start putting stuff in there other than just treats and desserts. And let your kitchen work for you so that you don't have to cook less. And please, last but not least, stop throwing food away. No more of that. Figure out what to do with it. Stop throwing it away. And last but not least, if you need help, get support. I just wanted to share with you guys the book that I wrote earlier this year that encompasses all of these tips and tricks. It's called The Savvy Gluten Free Shopper, How to Eat Healthy Without Breaking the Bank. And everything is in this book. It's been a 3-time bestseller on Amazon. It is on the lists for gluten-free, food allergies. We've had amazing writing write-ups and reviews in Living Without magazine, Delight Gluten Free magazine. I've been all over podcasts, and people have really found this information incredibly powerful. And like I said, it's made bestseller lists. So we've been really proud of the fact that we've been able to help so many people save money, feel better, eat more nutrient-dense food, and hey, at the end of the day, all that adds up to less stress. So it's available on Amazon.com. You can go and buy a hard copy or a Kindle version. Just search for the title, and we'll definitely have a link for you below. And last but not least, I wanted to leave you guys with a gift. My gift to you is the simple 7-day gluten-free menu. If you want to go to glutenfreeschool.com/gift, you can go and check this out. It's a really beautiful booklet with 18 recipes, a meal plan, and all sorts of stuff. And we've got other things that are coming down the pipeline for you to help make your life better. So we hope that you'll join us over at glutenfreeschool.com. Please stay in touch. glutenfreeschool.com. You can also go check out gfsummit.com if you're interested in learning more about how to be healthy and getting all your questions answered as a woman from a woman's perspective of what does it mean to get healthy and live a good gluten-free life from over 24 experts. Please follow me on Facebook and Twitter. I'd love to converse with you guys over there. And last but not least, if you have any thoughts or questions, send us an email, glutenfreeschool@gmail.com. We do read our emails. And if you have any questions, like I said, just come on over, search the site, ask your question through social media, or send us an email. I want to thank you so much for joining us. This has been really great, and I appreciate your time and your energy, and I hope that some of the tips here you'll be able to go out and start using immediately. And think about, what you're going to do in order to make this lifestyle switch and start saving money, feeling better, and eating those more nutrient dense foods. Thank you guys so much.